Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you the internet ads are now able to hack your phone, maybe even your computer? No, I'm not actually joking. I wish this would actually just be clickbait, but we live in a world where there are crazy hacks that are occurring right under our noses. Nobody's really talking about this, but if you haven't really been following, there is something that you probably heard known as the Intellexa leaks. Now, what actually ended up getting leaked? Well, what ended up getting leaked was a malware, or rather a protocol known as Aladdin, a protocol that would be used against somebody's smartphone. And basically, by viewing an advertisement, not even engaging with it, without even clicking on it, your phone would actually end up getting hacked. So how did this work? So this little infographic, as you can see right over here, is all cutesy. This was a... Now, if you're looking at this cutesy little infographic, best in market collection capabilities. You can see an image of a smartphone, an iPhone if you will, and you can see that these guys are proudly advertising that they can grab messages from WhatsApp, Telegram, Skype, Signal, many more. Even if you use an encrypted application like Telegram and Signal and WhatsApp by that extent, remember, if your phone is hacked, doesn't matter what your applications are because they can still siphon all the data out. Of course, they can also grab audio from calls and voice over IP applications. Gmail, Mail, Samsung Mail, nothing is immune. GPS location off of your device, capture images covertly using your device's sensors by the actual cameras. So remember how those billionaires put the tape on their MacBooks? That's because of shit like this. Activating your microphone for triggering a covert ambient recording, grabbing all of your passwords, certification, and tokens, as well as all of your media, files, contact, logs, device information, and browser history. Now, who would advertise something like this? Well, it would actually come out to an Israeli-linked company known as Intellexa. Now this bombshell kind of started coming out here. A company known as Intellexa was actually outed to be owned by a former Israeli intelligence officer known as Tal Dilian. So for anybody that doesn't know who Tal Dilian is, this is the guy, intelligence expert, community builder, and serial entrepreneur. If you actually look into his read more page, he has a whole bunch of fluffy good stuff to talk about him, but if you ever control F and look up the word sanction, for instance, you'll find a grand total of 0 mentions. Now, why am I bringing up sanctions? Well, if you pull up the Often of Foreign Asset Control sanctions list, which is where all the criminals, cartel leaders, gangbangers, anybody who's an actual legitimate spooky criminal goes on this list. Now, why would an individual like our friend Tal actually show up on this list? Well, not because he's a drug trafficker, it's because he's actually in the cyber designation. Coming from Israel, having dual citizenship in Malta, this is a guy that is on the sanctions list. But he won't ever tell you that because it wouldn't really make for a good, talk at those business meetings, I would imagine. Now, why would Tal show up inside this? Well, if you look at Tal's various operations, he's linked to Intellexa. Go to Intellexa's website and you'll find fish game casinos. Not exactly what we're looking for. But thanks to something like the Wayback Machine, you can see that their website is all about empowering law enforcement agencies. They're trying to be the good guys. They're giving good intelligence so we can stop the world from nasty harm. That's what all these companies tend to do, but in reality, they are effectively just gray market spyware organizations, except that they're tied and backed pretty much, I would say, by the Israeli government and connected deeply to the state. Because a lot of these guys end up leaving the IDF and leaving some of the biggest, cybersecurity divisions of the Israeli government and effectively starting these companies and distributing this product all over the world. Now, Intellexa is a company that is headquartered in areas like Cyprus, it's Ireland, places that are not actually Israel, right? So the way that they do this is they operate these organizations, and these organizations are basically structured in ways so that they can bypass that SDN list that I showed you earlier, because sanctions really do make it hard to work with a lot of legitimate law enforcement and governments around the world, okay? Now, Intellexa is not just a company that you can look up. Actually, you have to go a little bit further and look into the individuals behind it. So Tal is obviously one of the founders of the consortium, and his wife, Sarah Hamu, who is actually a person that does the managerial services for the consortium. But if you look at these companies like Citrox AD, Thaletris Limited, these are obviously organizations that exist to bypass or obfuscate who actually is Intellexa, which means bypassing things like sanctions, is done through this complex web where rerouting or redesignating assets and moving things around becomes sort of how they survive. Now, it was placed on a blacklist prohibiting any US business from dealing with the company in certain trade activities on the basis that it was trafficking in cyber exploits, and it threatened the privacy and security of individuals and organizations worldwide. In fact, you can actually look this up entirely through the United States Treasury Department for yourself. So underneath the Treasury Gov department, they'll tell you right here, Intellectia Consortium is a complex international web of decentralized companies that built and commercialized a comprehensive suite of highly invasive spywares, marketed under the brand name Predator, okay? So literally, we are to catch a predator, if you will. Now, they tell you about Tal Dilian, and of course, they tell you that Predator spyware can be used to gain access to data stored and transmitted from the target's device, such as a cell phone, through one-click and zero-click attacks, which require no interaction from the spyware to infect the device. Successful Predator attacks can provide the spyware's operators with access to sensitive information on the victim's device, including photos, geolocation data, personal messages, and microphone records. As a part of the growing commercial spyware industry, Intellectia maintains operations around the world. Now, on a sidebar, I think it's pretty hilarious the US government is losing their shit here when they were also, not just a few months ago, caught purchasing spyware, zero-click spyware, to spy on people through ICE. Okay, that was an insane thing to see. So it's kind of weird. Just I had to mention that. But yeah, literally, these are really bad people. They are fucking state-sanctioned hackers. So let's go back to the actual technology that they were using. Now, Amnesty International kind of talked about this. They blew this up alongside Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, and they brought up how these were mercenary spyware operations which existed. And I'll just give my little conspiracy here. I think that for the US government, when it comes to things like warrants, the easy way to really bypass it is, call up your friends out in Israel, get some of those companies to do crazy shit for you, and then you don't have to worry about anything because ultimately the crime is committed by another sovereign nation, okay? Or I would say rather a puppeteering nation at this point, if we're talking about this kind of stuff. Now, to show you how Aladdin worked, which was actually the newest thing out of this, remember, these guys have actually been around for years now. Predator is not something new, it has actually been something that has been talked about since 2022. But Aladdin was actually the interesting thing, zero-click infections through advertisements, meaning that if you're targeted and you are as careful as you can be, careful as a button, your cellular device, whether it be iOS or Android, as long as you were targeted by these people, they would use a variety of zero-day technologies, and as long as, in some cases, all you had to do was see the actual advertisement on your device, you would be infected. So according to this graphic, which is again provided by Intellectia in these leaked documents, would show that that was the actual user, okay? Basically, the first thing is to identify the target's IP address, which would be the identifier that they would use. They would find the mobile IP address, so they would know exactly who to target. Then, of course, the Aladdin system would come in and it would initiate the campaign for the target. So they would make a custom malvertising campaign for the person. So the intention was for them to just view it, maybe even engage with it, and as long as they did that, the malware would launch and things would just be bad. Once they could infect the normal use system of the device, they would then extract information through a network of CNC servers. So yeah, this was a pretty complicated setup going on, but to show you how it looked like, according to the leaked documentation, once they could get access to a user's device, they could actually see in real time what was happening, what stages were being accessed, yada yada yada. So of course, even beyond all of this, this is what it would look like to the actual operator of the malware. So once a device was hacked, for instance, it would show up in this little portal. And inside this portal, they could get an idea of how much the device was filled up. So for instance, here they mention iPhone X. So they mentioned that the device was, well, basically 98.5% free. The last time, I assume they were able to get a signal from the device, and they could get an idea of what apps were installed, call logs, contacts, media on the device, locations, microphone recordings, the Safari web browser, which I guess for Apple is effectively the only web browser, because I think all other web browsers on the App Store are effectively just a Safari front end. So, screenshot. And then you've got SMS browser or the SMS application. So this is what it would look like to the actual, hacker. Now, this is all honestly, like if you ever look into how much money is being earned over here, when they were targeted by the Greek authorities inside this entire, use of this technology, one of the realities of it was that in Irish financial accounts from 2021, it showed that the bulk of the money made by this group was from sales actually in the Middle East, which accounted for around 29.5 million euros of sales that year. So obviously, why would Israel be interested in the Middle East, for instance? Well, as you can imagine, there's probably a lot of people that they want to target in that region of the world. People such as activists, for instance. So yes, when it came to Pegasus, right, this is obviously a little bit different, but in 2021, 4 activists were infected with the Pegasus malware. So not exactly the Aladdin, not exactly Predator, but similar organizations and similar regions and obviously similar interests. Amnesty conducted actual forensic analysis on 9 Kazakhstani human rights activists, and they were able to confirm that 4 of those devices were infected with the Pegasus malware. Now we have to ask ourselves is who's really responsible? Could it be somebody in the Kazakh government? Could it be Israel? Remember these are mercenary operations. They operate with plausible deniability. Not every single one of these hacks is going to be sitting around with a giant billboard that says, "We did it." But I think it can reasonably be assumed that it could be the state of Israel because ultimately, why would you be interested in activists that are raising awareness against your government's atrocities on a worldwide scale? Now, a lot of these pieces of information were gathered and obtained through a leaked training video that was actually made for the employees of Intellexa. And of course, if you look over here, they're effectively just using Ubuntu right over here because you can tell with the wallpaper and the GNOME layout. But yeah, you can see that they've got TeamViewer, they've got a whole bunch of applications, and yes, it is an organization that's designed to effectively run really, really shady hacking, operations on people that necessarily aren't even criminals, just people that may be dissidents or critical of the state of Israel. Now, by the guys over at Insikt Group, they actually did a write-up themselves looking into the web of connections when it came to the various websites that were involved, or the various organizations that were involved with this entire situation. So to give you an idea right now, one of them, connected via IP or connection to the actual Intellecture group was an organization known as Morningstar Tech and Pulse Advertise. So according to the guys over at Insikt, based on the export data analyzed by them, Pulse FCZO likely operates as a front company used to facilitate product shipments, either directly to Intellecture clients or through local importing partners. Because remember, using this complex web is what you need when you're facing severe sanctions around the world. So one of the guys, Levi Amos, an Israeli entrepreneur, is listed as a director for Morningstar Tech. He has previously been mentioned in connection with Intellectia. So according to a report by the Czech investigative outlet, this shipping declaration from 2022 shows an Israeli company named as Amos Levy Consultant Limited. Now, all of Levy's Czech companies have one thing in common. They were either co-owned with him or brought from them Amos Uzan or Uzan's wife. So according to this situation, Uzan was an individual that worked for the Israeli government between the years of 2003 and 2009. And then he was followed by a role of a spokesperson for the Knesset from January 08 to 09, and between 2006 and 09, the prime minister was Ehud Olmert, who later admitted consulting for Intellectia. Anyways, the big point of this is when they were looking at shipping declarations, the contents in some of these were the 18 pallets of computer parts, which, as you can imagine, was probably used ultimately because the destination was Intellectia, what they were probably used for. You could probably just imagine, right? Now, Amos Levy is important in this because the supplier for what appeared to be 18 pallets of computer parts, which were being, of course, delivered to Intellectia SA, was Amos Levy Consultant Limited. So it's a wild web of connections you have to have if you're trying to evade any form of detection from, big countries like the United States, really anybody that has a hard on for you. And the only way you're able to effectively do that is if you're an entire nation state yourself. So according to Insikt, going back to some of these websites like Morningstar Tech appeared that they were actually involved in building some of those possible advertisements that would have been used by the Aladdin attack systems. So basically, looking into some of these things, right, again, these documents describe a proof of concept system named Aladdin, designed to enable operators to infect targeted iOS and Android devices. The ads, placed or directed toward specific victims, served as a delivery mechanism for the exploit. The leaked materials included demonstrations and technical demos illustrating how the system leveraged ad networks for targeting. So again, it was actually creating bait advertisements aimed at graphic designers, and again, when interacted with, would trigger the exploit chain resulting in spyware installation. Aladdin resembles Sherlock, another commercial surveillance capability developed by Israeli software makers. Now, according to this, Insikt isn't even aware that if this was actually used in the wild, and really nobody knows that. And I don't think anybody can know that because of the actual, sophisticated nature of it. But if you look carefully into, again, Pegasus or even Predator, you can see that no matter what, the actual people that they target are not necessarily people that are just criminals, they're just people that are necessarily dissidents of them, politicians, people that are reporters, for instance. And of course, when you look at where they were operating in, you can see areas like Armenia, Egypt, Greece, Indonesia, Madagascar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Serbia. This is one of those reasons where I always tell people, use a fucking ad block. You know why? Because if you don't use an ad block, you expose yourself to dog shit like this. I don't care what any organization like YouTube would say in regards to, their bottom line, but at the end of the day, when it comes to disgusting shit like this, remember for a second, the network of advertisements are so bad. Malvertising is an actual vector of attack at this point. If you care about your safety at all, okay, use an ad blocker. And again, the reason why I mention it is because you're not immune from this. Just because these are, again, sophisticated attacks that are going after politicians or anybody, doesn't mean that you can't get caught into the dragnet or you can't be targeted at some point. Remember, do not ever do not ever lose any bit of vigilance on the internet space, because shit like this is floating out there, and shit like this could possibly target you and have your information stolen, or ultimately put you on the creepiest watch list of all goddamn time. And this shouldn't be allowed, and this shouldn't be legal. Look, no matter what your stance is on Israel or whatever, at the end of the day, this is a crime. And amongst many crimes that I would say the Israeli government is responsible for, whether it be their genocidal regime, whether it be other shit, this is an actual attack on people's privacy. It's an actual really disgusting attack. Honestly, if countries wanted to actually flex some real power, they would absolutely go beyond the sanctions and really target them hard. Israel deserves a lot of bad press for not just other things that they do, but shit like this. Their government is absolutely disgusting when it comes to the network of spying that they do around the world. And again, before anybody conflates this with, anti-Semitism or anything like that, remember, Israeli people are the people, but their government is absolutely responsible for the actions that are seen over here, because really the only way these things can happen is through state actors. And those state actors need to honestly be fucking stopped, and those state actors need to honestly be brought to some level of justice. But that's just me going beyond where I need it to be. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting to a point where, yes, the actual hacks are coming at us, ladies and gentlemen, through the advertisement systems. So anytime anybody tells you to not use ad block, you tell them, no, we live in a real fucked up world. So yes, have your ad blockers enabled. Go network wide. Use all the extensions you can. Switch to an ad blocking web browser like Brave, for instance, and experience the internet with a complete peace of mind. Because ladies and gentlemen, it's scary out in those digital streets. And yeah, this is one of the most interesting little stories that I wanted to bring up because, yeah, Intellexa is one of many companies out there in the world, but they're the ones that just recently got exposed for doing crazy shit like this. You know, and if it wasn't for the fact that countries like Pakistan, for instance, which I don't even believe recognize the state of Israel, but absolutely will recognize them when it comes to purchasing this kind of software, allegedly were the ones that were kind of the reason for this to break through. Amnesty International uncovered it through an attack on a human rights lawyer. Again, because Pakistan ended up getting involved here, they bought the software and used it against their own people. So it's not usually done by the Israeli state. I didn't want to make this look like Intellexa was just a wing of the Israeli government. They're absolutely not. But again, they're also a mercenary group that outsources this crap to anybody that buys. And sometimes regimes that have absolute disdain for dissidents, which again, you know, countries like Pakistan probably would, even countries like the United States, for instance, because with the ICE malware that they just bought, who do you think they're going to use that against? Okay, who the fuck do you think they're targeting? People they don't like with zero-click malware. And in this instance, in Pakistan, Balochistan province over here, over WhatsApp through the summer of 2025, a human rights lawyer was attacked. So at least in Pakistan, the predator spyware was actively being used. And ultimately, this shit is an attack on your free speech, it's an attack on your expressions, it's an attack on you as a... It's an attack on humanity, in my opinion. The thing is, ultimately, these kind of malwares that exist are the reason why I make videos about computer viruses. I make videos about, you know, having an ad blocker, especially because of this. But also I make videos about, you know, why you should fight for encryption, why you should fight for basic human privacy. Because ultimately, the moment you start giving that up is the moment that these organizations become much more widespread. And again, you can see why they're targeting people. They're targeting people because they're dissidents. They're people that are activists. They're people that are journalists. These, in a majority of cases, I would say, based on what we've seen pulled out here, these people are not drug dealers. These people are not criminals. These people are not the worst and worst of society. They're people that want to break the status quo and bring down bad practices. And ultimately, the system doesn't like that. And that's why companies, mercenaries like this exist to target people. I would say organizations like this, in my opinion, should absolutely be treated as, you know, cyber terrorists. They should be treated as fucking terrorists. In my opinion, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.